Hello, hello, hello. This is Kenny Perkins, aka Your Cancer Guy. And again, as we always do, what we always show you is we have another phenomenal guest. Now, this time we've traveled here in the US, but we're talking about the Midwest. Yes, this next guest is coming from Missouri, right? And so we're going to be talking today about breast cancer, right? So many of us come across people that have had cancer or going through cancer treatments of some sort. So what do we do? How do we help them? You know, there's so many different avenues. Sometimes we get paralyzed on what to do. But our next guest, she's an advocate. She helps people with, giving that information and getting it out. And that's the kind of support we need in this community. So I'm proud and honored to bring in our next guest. Join me to bring in our next guest, Mindy Miller. Hey, look at all that, Mindy.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, Mindy, thank you.
Great intro.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us here at All Talk Oncology. This is not easy for a lot of people to discuss. Sometimes it's embarrassing for people. There's so many different mixed emotions that go through this, right? For me, I've been treating cancer patients as a radiation therapist for like 2 decades, right? So I see a lot of that. But now being a cancer coach, I come in, the one-on-one with my clients and discussing some of the things that may be hindering them. Let me ask you, Mindy, when you first got diagnosed, how was that for you?
Well, I was sitting at work when I received my diagnosis. So I received the call at work and, I had that disbelief, clearly when I was going through the diagnostics, as far as like the biopsy, when I had a good feeling that things weren't good for me. But I still sort of had that unrelenting hope that maybe, just maybe, it can be explained in a different way.
Can I pause you on that, Mindy? Because that's a good question here. You said you thought that things weren't going good for you. Like, what was it that caused you to go and get checked in the first place?
Well, so I discovered my own lump at the top left side of my left breast. I had been a very competitive runner leading up to my diagnosis, which was in early 2016. I had just been outdoors running hills in very cold weather, and I had come inside and sat on the couch and crossed my arms and kind of hugged myself. And that was when I found my lump. And, I was a small-statured, small-busted female, and I feel like that would have been something that I would have found showering. So it was really all just kind of a surprise, but I knew to take it seriously, and I got right into my physician, and fortunately, she took my situation very seriously too, and agreed this does not feel right, and the diagnostics ensued. But I was, even in my biopsy, even in everything they said, the folks who are working with me and trying to figure this out were very honest with me that things are not looking benign. Things are looking like malignancy. So even with that, I still tried to hold on to a bit of hope that maybe it wasn't, maybe after the biopsy, maybe after more detailed imaging, it'll be explained away in a different way. And so it wasn't. And so when I got that news, of course, I was crushed. Kind of a funny little story my husband and I tell surrounding that day. It was around Valentine's Day, 2016. We had dinner reservations. It was a Friday that I received my diagnosis. We had dinner reservations pre-planned for that evening at a really nice local restaurant. It was supposed to be, Valentine's, but it was also supposed to be our celebration of getting good news. We were just trying to expect good things. And, that morning at about 10:30, I didn't get good news. So by the time we got back to the house, we were sitting there just trying to wrap our minds around things. And I say husband, then fiance, now husband. We were trying to wrap our minds around things, and we realized, like, okay, well, it's probably time that we should cancel our dinner reservation. And we had the phone picked up and ready to call and cancel it. And then I don't remember which one of us said this, but one of us asked, well, what if we go? And so we thought, yeah, we can do this, and that sort of became a very symbolic moment of, what if we just do it? What if we make the best of this situation? What if we go? What if we don't let this hold us back? So I had bought a red dress to wear that evening, and by God, I put my red dress on, and we went out to dinner, and we had some tears, but we were also laughing. Like, we were able to, create that joy in a really dark and dismal situation. And that whole, order of events there just really became symbolic for how we would move through my cancer story. We would just keep going. We would hold fast our joy, and we wouldn't let anything take that away from us.
For sure.
So
thank you so much, Mindy, for that, because, for the listeners that may not have that ability or discovered that ability, right? Where does that come from? Like, how were you able to kind of transition in the fear of a diagnosis?
Part of it was leaning into my faith into my faith system, and, choosing to trust as far as that goes, trust my faith system, without, beyond the shadow of a doubt. That was a piece of it. But I tend to be kind of a binary thinker in that, either this is going to take me down or I'm going to rise above this. I've never been one to really see much of a middle ground. And so it was a lot of choice, but it was really, really, really hard. And even throughout, there were bad days, there were awful days, there were difficult times, but it was I just tried to keep my eye on, moving through and moving forward and just doing the best I could. That looked very different from day to day, but just with that general goal of overcoming.
Yeah. So talk to us. I mean, so here you receive this news at work, you come back, get dressed, you go out to dinner. Okay. So you're painting that picture, and I'm seeing it. So how do you move forward in the sense of, now you're talking about treatments? What are your options? And then how are you telling your family or your friends about this?
Yeah, so I was a very private, personalized person prior to my diagnosis. I didn't share much, so nobody really knew that anything was going on except for like first degree family members. And so, I very carefully and gently told them of the news that day. I actually wound up sharing on social media because I knew that this is not something that I would even be able to, keep to myself. And, I do want to enact my support army, my prayer army. I knew that it would be very difficult to go through that by myself and to not allow my support system in. And so I made that choice, and that was very difficult for me. But I started to share, and it was just really amazing how, when I was feeling at my lowest, I kind of felt compelled to share something, on social media, even if it was just a request for, well wishes, or, for something upcoming, or, a prayer request. And there was something very, very peace bringing about that, because as soon as I would post and, my support system would start interacting with me, I felt that empowerment. So when I didn't have the strength, it was like the people around me helped to give me that strength to get through those times. So that was pivotal for me, was letting people in and really embracing that. But also, kind of talking about, by and large across, even all of the years that it's been 7 years since my diagnosis, setting very small, reachable goals, very small goals at times. Sometimes it might have been a goal to get from hour to hour, or, sometimes even less than that. But if I'm the type of person that I can get overwhelmed very easily. So if I'm looking at, all of the different phases of treatment to come, all the different types of treatment to come, the length of time until I felt like I could be towards a better state of healing, I wasn't able. So I had to break it down very piecemeal, very small, reachable goals, and just try to focus on the now and getting through the now, because the later would come later.
Well, I tell you, Mindy, you've tackled so many different things here, right? So we're talking about getting your support team, but how do you do that, right? Because I think a lot of times people don't know how the support team, they need it, they want it, but how do you go about getting it? And, so that's one thing that you touched on, but not how that came about. And then also working through some of the fear that you experienced. You talked about being able to take it 1 hour at a time, versus trying to looking at the whole picture. How did that come about? So those are two questions. And for my listeners, one is how did you develop this support team that you were able to now open up to? You went from private to now having a support team. And then two, how did you start breaking that down piece by piece that would allow you to manage it?
Yeah, so it all started with when I chose to announce my cancer diagnosis publicly on my Facebook account. So that was just my social circle, professional circle, family, like extended family who didn't already know. But before long, I was being introduced to other people. I was, kind of brought into there's a wonderful local support organization. It's almost like, this is a weird word to use for this context, but there was almost like a networking, and that's really how my support system grew, was, meeting other people in the cancer community, whether that was through my, people that I would meet at chemo, like my chemo buddies. I had the people who had treatments the same days as me. It was kind of fun. We were all generations up to, one lady in her 80s. And, it was just very small, but it grew. And, people would introduce me to other, local cancer survivors too. So, I just kind of got pulled in. I would tell you, the community around me, I felt like they just gave me a big hug and, really tried to introduce me to people that they thought that, I would benefit from connecting with, people who've been there. And so, it just grew very organically and very, very slowly, but, sharing on Facebook, that's all it was. And sometimes people would share my posts and people I didn't know would comment, and, we'd start conversations, and it just happened very naturally, if that answers that question.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then go ahead.
Yeah. And it helps to see that sometimes it's just the simple things, right? Using the tools that you had. I mean, if I can, mirror with the things you said, and for the listeners, Mindy utilized some of the tools she had, which was social media platforms. She used Facebook, and obviously it took courage to open that up and to tell people about it. But when you see how the support came about, sometimes the blessing is on the other side of the fear. So I hope you guys took note of that gem she dropped on that. So if you are going through this, you've just been diagnosed, sometimes it's about reaching out, and you never know who's going to show up. You never know who's going to show up for you in the time of need. So thank you for that. And yes, now. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Just to kind of, build on that even further, here it is. Like I said, it's been 7 years since my diagnosis. So many of the people, if I stop and look at the people who've been the closest people to me, even for the last, 4 to 5 years, the people who are closest to me in this world, in my life, there is a large number of them who I have met through my cancer story, through my cancer journey, that I've met in some way, shape, or form through that, the people that I surround myself with. And, when I started to realize these people that, I'm connecting with are golden, I did start to let more in, because a lot of people just want someone else who understands, who's been there, who can feel validated, even if when we interact, on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and we're just venting about something, like that's okay, because we're not alone. And, through these friendships, many of them starting on social media, they've become, in-person friendships. People always say in real life, well, like this is real life, and the relationships that you can build through shared experiences are just priceless.
Absolutely. Well said, Mindy. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And you had another question. You were asking me about the setting small goals. Was that it?
Yeah. When things get overwhelming, you said, you had to break it down, to things that you can manage. How did that come about?
That was survival for me. That was just, if I'm going to get to, this afternoon, I have got to take the small, that was survival, like in the most raw form, like think, Bear Grylls in the woods, like that is survival. So with my chemo regimen, one of my anti-nausea medications had a known but rare side effect of extreme anxiety. So you couple that, natural anxiety you're experiencing with going through cancer with a side effect that you don't figure out until like 2.5 months into chemo that it's from one of your meds. The anxiety piece was very real. So that's why I say it absolutely became a survival thing. I'm gonna pray through these moments. I am going to, distract myself with this in these moments. I spent a lot of time on my couch during that time. So, it was, whether it was get through this TV program or get to the commercial break, it was a crawl at times. But I had recognized that if I tried to look too far ahead, the anxiety would ramp even more. And so recognizing that was when I really pulled things back and just focused on the here and now, because I can't do anything about, tomorrow, but I can do a lot about this moment that I'm sitting in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mindy, let me ask you, because cancer, when we first hear it, it has this feel and this thought behind it. When you got diagnosed with that and hearing the word cancer, what did you associate that with?
Well, my first thought was, and I don't know if this is an association. I was concerned for my future. I felt good about my situation and that my oncologist had empowered us, to know that he informed me that I had a good prognosis. It was just going to be very, very hard. So in those times, it wasn't so much my mortality I was concerned about, but it was quality of life. My joy. I was very concerned at first that cancer would steal my joy. When I remember sitting on the couch the day of my diagnosis in tears, and I asked my then fiance, I wonder how long it'll be till I laugh again. I was very worried about that. So, my association with cancer was diminished quality of life. And, I immediately recognized that I'm not going to be living at the same rate and pace and style that, my then peer group was. I kind of had picked up on the fact that my life is going to be really different than those around me for a while. So, but, one of my soapboxes throughout has been just doing everything I can to hold fast to my joy and hang on to that hope, because, if you don't have that, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. Mindy, well said.
Thank you.
Well said. And, I say, cancer does have this feel about it, and and that's why you being an advocate is so important. That's why I feel being a cancer coach is so important, because so many times when we hear cardiovascular disease, we don't have that type of feeling associated with it. when you hear that someone has diabetes, you don't have that type of feeling that's associated with you have cancer.
That's a good point.
And the reason I'm saying this is as I'm teaching this, I have a course for that, because those two diseases I spoke about have a high mortality rate as far as in this country, more than cancer. And so when you think, well, why does cancer have that feeling? I think the advocacy role plays has a huge effect on people. It can have a huge effect on people to get that message out, the education. So that was the reason why I asked that question. So, but getting back to you, all of this is about you, but talk to me about, as you're getting close to finishing your treatments, how does your outlook change, or how does that now appear to you?
So I was able to finish my 5 years of post breast cancer hormonal therapy, endocrine therapy in August of 21. And I would tell you, so I was receiving a monthly injection into my abdomen and also taking a daily pill. That's what that looked like. And I was, of course, in a medically induced menopause. And, on one hand, there were a lot of quality of life implications to being in menopause for nearly 6 years of your life as a woman in her early 30s. So, while there was positivity towards, looking forward to hopefully not having to deal with those symptoms anymore, far larger than that, though, especially about the 6 months leading up to those therapies ending, it was very concerning for me, because my treatments were my safety net. I felt like this is my insurance policy here. This is what I have, to receive and to take to prevent my recurrence, probabilities. But when these are over, that's it. I led a healthy lifestyle. Like most people, like many people who find themselves with a cancer diagnosis, many of us are doing all the right stuff to begin with, and so there wasn't really like one little, switch I could flip to bring about that peace. So it took some digging deep in those months leading up to the end of those therapies. And ultimately, when I say making a decision, that makes it sound simplified, but it's not. It took me months and months and months to come to the realization that I needed to make a decision. Either I'm going to let, this disease affect my future, or I'm not. And so I developed a mantra, kind of an affirmation. I began to tell myself, I am safe in my body, because a lot of conversations around cancer, surround not trusting our bodies. But I had to, develop an awareness that cancer is something that happened to my body. My body didn't do this to me. So really making that separation and repeating to myself, and helping myself to finally believe that I am safe in my body helped me to finally take that leap, when the end of those endocrine therapies happened and it was time to fly, that that affirmation was my wings.
Absolutely. You touched on so many key points here, and you're dropping gems today. If you guys
I'm trying, man.
I'll tell you, if you guys are listening in, Mindy is dropping gems today, and I hope you can find value in this, because this is about empowering you in your cancer journey. And so as you listen to her, she talked about making the decision wasn't something that happens right away, right? These things, Mindy, they take time. You said months. Oh, yeah. And it's true. So don't feel overwhelmed that you're not making decisions fast enough. Give yourself that permission to make these decisions, as I would like to say to you. But I hope you picked up on something. Mindy talked about the safety net. And Mindy, you're not alone in that, right? I mean, there's so many cancer patients, they go through, as I call, the ringer, right? You get diagnosed, you go see the surgeon, you see the surgeon, now you go to see the medical oncologist, the medical oncologist, now you see the radiation oncologist, and okay, go back and see your surgeon again. Like it's just a whirlwind. And then all of a sudden, everything comes to an end, as you spoke about. And I'm glad you brought that up, because so many people go, what now?
Yeah.
Right? What do I do now? Like, everyone was giving me so much attention on my health journey, and now I'm by myself. And so I hope you picked up on what Mindy said. She talked about being able to come up with mantras, affirmations. Mindy, let me ask you, how important is it? I know the answer to, but I want you to say that. How important is it, the words that we say to ourselves?
They're critical. They absolutely are. I've always been one to believe in the self-fulfilling prophecy. And, language is powerful. Words are powerful. And I really think that through, spending time with those words and what they mean, we can begin to believe them. I really do. And that's where I was with that. But, I strongly believe that, without words of, self-empowerment and thoughts of self-empowerment, I know me personally, I would not have fared well in my mental health, because I would have started to believe, the negative thought spiral that is very easy to slip down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Here, if you heard Mindy in the beginning, she was a private person, didn't give much, kept it all to herself. And now, listen, she's dropping gems, she's sharing, she's giving you jewels that you can utilize on your cancer journey. And so thank you so much for that, Mindy. I always want to compliment you on that. So the next question I had, Mindy, so you're going through this, you get through it. How has it changed? How has the Mindy before diagnosis changed to the Mindy we see in front of us today?
The first thing that comes to mind is I have learned and be very appreciative of what it means to live slowly. So what I mean by that is being present, taking the value out of, the busy culture, learning to say no to things that don't serve, betterment in my life. Prior to my diagnosis, I was living fast. I didn't know how to say no to, extra work. I was working far too many hours. I was just, grinding, as they say. And that wasn't good for me. I came to realize afterwards, because I have come to, thrive on rest. And one of the things that's so important to me is, kind of taking away the lazy connotation with rest, and, speaking of how restorative rest can be. So I would tell you, presently, I live my life more slowly, more intentionally. I don't need out doing all the things. I've become very content with homebody life and spending time with, the people that have been there for me, the people that remain present in my life, here even 7 years after my diagnosis, because, that has changed. And I'm a medically based speech language pathologist for my career, and I work with older adults. Many of our patients in our inpatient rehab facility are patients who have an active oncology story. And, I found myself, I've become a more empathetic human. I've advocated for them too, with my peers, and helping my peers to understand, better understand what these people are going through, the emotional parts, the mental parts. So yeah, I am a very different person, but I'm very intentional about how I spend my time and with whom I spend my time. And I've really come to value relationships and nurturing those, because I've learned how precious they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. I always ask that question, because it's the way you start is not the way you end, right? I mean, it's just a metamorphosis. And a diagnosis like this causes that, to really look at life and from a different lens. And so I thank you. I thank you for sharing that with us. And I love that. I love that, man. How you looking at life and going through life a lot slower, a lot more intentional. What has that brought to you and the people around you?
Me, I feel like my anxiety levels have diminished significantly. I'm still human. I still experience that, of course, but I'm better able to manage it. It has looked like, more quality time with friends and family. And, my life is just a lot slower, and that's okay. I'm not working a lot of extra hours. Really, to be honest, I'm not working many extra hours at all, if any. So it's been very good for me professionally, just because I feel, and personally, because I can just be more present in the time that I allocate to given tasks and endeavors.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about your advocacy here now. Mindy now is an advocate. She's out here speaking. Talk to us a little bit about that and, some of the joys you get from that.
Yeah, so it all started with, when I was diagnosed, it was 2016. The cancer community nor the breast cancer community were things yet on Instagram. So that really didn't pop out for another couple of years. So I initially began sharing, just kind of breaking out of my shell through Facebook, kind of putting my toe in the water, just sharing more factual type things about what I was going through, more like update type things. But then once I branched into the Instagram world, it was probably 2018, 19, something like that. I started to share my story. And as I did that, I found myself really enjoying the writing process. So through that, I was beginning to share more personal aspects of my journey. And in doing so, kind of started to build a little community around me. And, I had people that I could, visit with and vent with who understood. And so, I realized how powerful human connection was. So, my posts became a little bit more unique for me in that, I tried to, talk about things that other people weren't talking about. And I found that in doing that, more people responded, positively and, felt seen and validated, because these were things that, really emotional pieces, that really weren't widely discussed. And so I got to see the value of community through that and, felt empowered to do more. And so in 2021, 4 other young breast cancer survivor friends and I had formed an advocacy group, and we had a pretty good campaign going, about, our belief in the importance of self breast exams, breast health education and testicular health education, for young people, and the importance of, the benefits that can follow early diagnosis with becoming, more familiar with your body, but in a formalized, standardized type of way versus just, being generally body aware. And so that was very empowering too, because we were able to, have some really strong conversations with some major organizations in the cancer world. So through that, I've just found myself really enjoying the writing process and talking more about the things that I never would have spoken of before. As of late, I had a piece published in what was once Health Magazine, now electronically based Health, talking very deeply about, my fertility journey. I'm 36 years old now, and my now husband and I, we've had some struggles there and some limitations. And so talking about those things that are kind of scary and kind of sad and just uncertain, a lot of the uncertainties, that's been really important in addition to those education pieces, because, between community and education, I just feel like those are the 2 pillars for for me in advocacy. My why is always, I think of the people that will be the newly diagnosed, the men and women who will be diagnosed in 2 weeks, 2 months, and 2 years. So if we, the community members can drop breadcrumbs of hope, maybe that's something they can find and pick up, and, it can be what they need in those times.
Absolutely. We need more advocates out here. And so we thank you so much for being a person out here to help people, educate them and get them through. Let them know that, hey, there are survivors out here, and we're thriving. And not only you're surviving, but you're thriving. And here you are 7 years later, you have your family and friends, and, the perspective in life is completely different. And so thank you so much for that, Mindy, for coming on here and empowering those that are listening.
Thank you. I think it's really important, especially once I hit my 5 years after diagnosis, I kind of felt a little bit lost myself. Like, okay, so what's my story now? And a little bit of an identity struggle then. And I realized that people need to see that long-term survivorship is possible. It's a thing. It's real. And, for any of us in this space, we are all acutely aware that can change in minutes. We can be right back into things very quickly. And so, kind of the way I see it is, while I'm able, to live and thrive, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to hope that long-term survivorship continues to be possible. But I just really want to set the example that it is.
Absolutely. And I think you're doing a fine job at that. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on here talking about that. And so all of you guys that are listening out there, just know, as I say in every single episode, you're not alone in this. We're in this together. And it's a joy for me to always have guests on here and to connect with them and always learning their story, because I know each individual is so different and their story is so different. And I just hope that you can grab a gem from each one of them, and find yourself, familiarize yourself with that person, and say, hey, yeah, I love that story. It's very similar to mine, and I can do this. And I recently come out with a book, and it's called about the 5 stages of winning with the cancer diagnosis. So you can pick that up on Amazon. And it helps you to see, there's 5 stages that people go through when you get diagnosed. And how do you get through those stages? Be encouraged by that. And you can find that out in my book. And we also have a program that's coming out. It's actually completed. But the program is going to help you get through some of the misconceptions that are coming in with cancer. Some of the things that you can do to get through it. Mindy, she talked about the affirmations, some mantras that she utilized. We talk about that in the course. We talk about how preparing you for treatments and what's that about. So I'm excited about that. Make sure you look that up. You can see that on my website and also on my social media platforms, because all we're doing here, we're out here helping and making sure that people can feel supported as they go through this cancer journey. So Mindy, again, kudos to you. I'm so just makes me so happy to see you living your life, not just going through it, but intentionally and joyfully. And that's important, right? Because I think sometimes we lose joy in life, regardless of a diagnosis or not. We just lose joy. And so for you to come in here and say, hey, I've been diagnosed and I've gone through it and finished, and yes, I'm joyful in life, speaks volumes. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That has been, my key motivation from the start is to never relinquish my joy. And I hope that I can be an example that it's possible to hold on to your joy and always feel that, Absolutely. Even in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. Mindy, thank you so much for coming here. All Talk Oncology. It's been a pleasure, and we continue to hope the best for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you do to help those of us in the cancer community, both professionally and, through side endeavors such as this. Really appreciate it. Thank you for including me and sharing my story.
Yeah.